Hello, everybody. Welcome to Talk About House. I'm Todd.
I'm Juana.
Okay, once again, we're going to talk about the housing market.
We are, but before that, we're going to talk about something far more important than the housing market, and that's my hair.
What about your hair?
You can see forehead.
Oh, yeah, she did change the way she's doing her hair for it now.
So in the comments, leave me a note. You want to see my forehead or not?
Okay.
This is very important. Now, going back to the housing market.
Okay, housing market. All right, so what we're going to talk about is how right now compares not to the great financial crisis, but to the 1980s when interest rates went up to 18%.
Okay.
And what we're going to do is we're going to look at what happened to home prices when interest rates went from 9% to 18%, because that should basically mirror, because environments are about the same.
Right, but we're not suggesting that interest rates are going to 18%, so we want to make that very clear.
Okay, so we'll start off, and we're going to go through the article. We have a bunch of stuff to cover, a lot of great info. Okay, so here's the first one. The housing market's following a similar playbook from the 1980s when mortgage rates doubled. Here's what it could mean for home buyers today. Okay, so basically, we had this Fed chairman named Paul Volcker.
Yeah, and this man basically wrote the playbook of how to break the back of inflation. So
he had really high inflation. We had extremely high inflation in the U.S. There were wars in the Middle East, and OPEC was choking out the U.S. for getting oil. So, in the late 70s, if you went to get gas, you couldn't get it. A lot of gas stations were closed, and energy costs were out of the roof, and inflation was just burning. So instead of doing like 0.5% raises, he raised interest rates he raised the federal funds rate 4% overnight. He just said it's 4% now. He just raised it from what it was up 4% in one shot. It's the biggest thing ever, right?
Right.
Okay. Moving on with the article. Now that's not happening now.
No, but Jerome Powell is a student of history, and as such, he's very familiar with Paul Volcker and his economic policy and how he viewed interest rates as a tool to break the back of inflation. And he has definitely implemented a lot of those strategies to deal with inflation this time around.
Okay, here's another quote. The U.S. housing market is showing parallels to the 1980s when mortgage rates doubled, right? Okay, here's the next quote. Bank of America highlighted that both periods had strong pent-up demand due to demographic trends.
Right, so the demographic trends that are parallel are that at the time the baby boomers were coming into their own and they were purchasing homes. And what we have today are the millennials who are also coming into their own and purchasing homes. So you have these two large groups that are at their in their home buying season of their lives, so to speak.
Okay. High inflation, which we have now, surging mortgage rates, and pent-up demand for homes from a growing demographic boom are just a few of the similarities between today and 4 decades ago.
Right.
Music was much better back then, late 70s. It's terrible now. I don't think there's any decent music.
Okay, how's fashion then?
Bill, I think we're still we do the long hair and bell bottoms.
Okay.
I was a runner back then, so I had kind of long hair.
Okay,
this is before I went in the military. We think that the 1980s are a better analogy for today's market than the 2008 housing crash. Bank of America said in a Thursday note. I always love it when they quote whole corporations. Like somebody at Bank of America said that, but they're hiding behind Bank of America.
Right.
So Bank of America apparently said that.
It makes it sound more prestigious. It makes it sound more serious. It makes it sound more believable.
Right. Basically like the king.
Yeah.
It's like coming from the king.
Right. Credibility, yes.
Okay. Inflation soared through the 1970s and into 1980. Mortgage rates doubled from 9% to 18% by 1981, and baby boomers were entering their prime home buying age. Okay? All right. Now, fast forward to 2003. Inflation has surged. The average 30-year fixed has doubled from 3 to above 7, and millennials are driving pent-up demand for homes as they enter their prime home buying age, right?
So we're talking about 2023, not 2003, but yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, 2023.
Yes.
I said 2003, I meant 2023.
Yes.
Okay. All right. The other similarities between today's housing market and that of the 80s, home prices surged by over 16% in 1979. then flatlined as year-over-year growth slowed 0.5% in 1982. Additionally, existing home sales fell 54% from peak to trough. So home prices surged 16%, interest rates doubled. Home prices, though, still went up 0.5%.
Right.
They didn't crash.
Right. So when they're saying that that 54% has to do with the number of transactions, not with home value. So I want to be very focused about that, very clear. So when they're saying that the number of transactions dropped, that's the 54%, not prices.
Right. Now, back then, we had the Crash Bros, who were the parents of the existing Crash Bros. They taught them how to Crash Bro. They didn't have to go to college. They learned this from their parents. And they didn't have YouTube or an internet back then. They used to go on their CB radios and they would just broadcast all their Crash Bro housing doomer stuff about how interest rates are going to crash the housing market.
I thought it was letters to the editor, but okay.
Letters to the editor. Okay. All right. Now here's the similarity to 2023.
Okay.
After the COVID-19 pandemic, home prices jumped nearly 21%.
Yay.
Darn, that's pretty close. Before flatlining to 0% year-over-year growth in June. That was June of 2022 to June of 2023. But the last 4 months, they've all gone up 4 months in a row. Mm-hmm. Okay? We just did that video yesterday. Meanwhile, existing home sales have plunged nearly 40%. Do you guys recognize the very similar numbers? Like literally the exact same thing that happened then is happening right now, right?
So they're saying existing home sales plunged 40%. That's the number of transactions, not prices. So I know I'm beating up on this, but it's very important because a lot of times you hear things or you see posts, not tweets, you see posts, or you see things online, and that kind of gets a little bit confused, we'll put it that way, to be polite, with home prices, but it's not. It is a number of transactions, not home prices.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to put up this chart. This is the median sale price of homes in the U.S. This is a Fred chart. Mm-hmm. It goes back to 1965. And first of all, go back to 1980, 81, 82. And home mortgages doubled. They went to 18%. Mm-hmm. And I want to know where the home price housing crash was on this chart. Because as you can see, there wasn't one. Home prices basically just kind of moderated, just kind of chilled out, went sideways for a year or two, went up by 1% basically for 2 years. And then in 1983, home prices just started kind of creeping up again, just like the normal thing, 4% a year.
Right.
Okay, the other thing I want to point out in this chart is very interesting. It's harder to see when you go further back. But when you get basically to around the 1990s, you can see how it's jagged. Mm-hmm. It kind of goes it goes up, like every 10-year period, there's 10 up and downs. Wonder, what are those 10 up and downs that actually exactly follow 10 years? What are those? That's
seasonality. That's, what happens in the spring versus what happens in the fall.
Yeah, so if you go to the very end, this chart only goes to the fall of 23, and that last little down was the fall or 2022. So it goes from this last 2022 spring to fall of 2022. And in probably 6 months, we'll be able to see this spring of this year where you see it go back up. So you can see the seasonality where home prices go up and down every year. You can see the housing crash that happened starting in 2006 to 2010, basically. Mm-hmm. Where home prices decline there pretty substantially. But exactly what happened in 1980 is happening today. Sales are the same. Interest rates have doubled. You have these demographic changes. We have high demand. And home prices are basically doing what they did back then. They're just kind of chilling out. No crash. Mm-hmm. Right?
Right. So remember, what we're comparing is the fundamentals of today with the fundamentals of like the early 80s, right? So because that's the best similarity as far as what happened then versus what's happening now. What happened with the Great Recession, with 2005 through 2011 or 12, that was a separate issue, and it had to do with lending. Lending today is much more stringent, have to be much better qualified. However, and I'm going to kind of say a little caveat here. I am seeing lenders, because of the high interest rates, get a little more creative, shall we say?
Okay.
And that bothers me.
In what way are they creative?
So I am seeing lenders that are doing like 1% down, and that scares me because anytime people have to borrow basically 100%, that is very troubling because then people don't have equity. And when people don't have equity, it's much easier for them to walk away from a house. It's much easier for them to get into trouble as far as owing more on the house than it's worth. It's much more difficult for them to sell because now they're going to be short because of the costs of selling a property. So things like that do bother me. Those kinds of loans at this point make up less than 1% of the market, so they're not a big concern. But if the number of those loans starts to increase, then that's something to watch going forward.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I agree with that. It is a very small,
very small, yes,
portion of the market, and
it's probably like 1/10 of 1% right now.
and then the other thing you have to keep in mind is even though they're basically because you can go out if you're a veteran, you can do a 0%. You can do a VA and not pay anything down, but you still have to income qualify.
Right.
So you can't say, oh, I make $2,000 a month. I want a house where my payment's $1,500. They're not going to give you a house, right?
Right.
You still have to meet the income. So you should be able to, and this includes all of your debt. This includes your car payment, your credit card payments, any payments you have, and then your home payment, and it still has to be like 37% of your total income, or they're not going to give you a loan.
Right. So while the VA does offer a zero down product, and I agree with you, those loans are actually few and far between. Buyers do not choose those loans.
Right.
So overall, the number of loans that are generated, that are new loans that have a very low down payment, are still incredibly small. But if that grows, and if that grows sufficiently, that becomes troubling. So that's just something to watch.
Okay.
That's kind of part of what we always tell you, is that we're going to tell you everything. We're not going to manipulate the data. We're going to tell you the good, the bad, so that you can make informed choices.
Okay. Now, one of the things that happened was a ton of housing development, like 1.5 million homes a year being built for a decade, right? And here's a quote from the article. For now, there's no sign of excess housing development, and household debt is not much of a concern, Bank of America said, but warned there should be more turbulence ahead as prospective homebuyers struggle to keep up with soaring mortgage rates. I want to talk about this.
Right. So be very careful about the language. What did they say? They said prospective homebuyers. Does that mean the same thing as homebuyers? No. These are people looking to buy, not necessarily the people that are buying. So the people that are actually buying tend to be well-qualified buyers putting down a good chunk of money versus prospective buyers who's anybody who's window shopping. So those are two different things. And I thought that the other part of the quote that I thought was interesting, Bank of America said there should be turbulence. What does that mean, that there should be turbulence? I really don't like that language. I think language is important, particularly when they're being quoted and particularly when they're trying to be forward-looking.
Well, they stepped on their foot in the article.
They did.
And we are going to point it out because it's a gross misstatement.
Yes.
But I want to ask you, I'm going to make you do a math in public.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Help.
I did this at the last Mensa meeting I went to.
Okay.
And everyone in the room got it right.
Oh, wow.
So if you can get it right,
okay,
you will I will give you an honorary membership to Mensa.
Oh,
I'm
goody.
authorized to do that. Okay.
Goody. I'm so excited.
You bought a house in 2005
Yes.
for $200,000.
Yes.
Okay. You got a loan. Yes. Your loan is $1,500.
My loan or my payment?
Your payment. Your monthly payment is $1,500. You refied that loan in 2021 when interest rates tanked.
Got it.
And now your payment is $1,000.
Right.
Okay. When you refied it, you got a 2.75% interest rate, 30-year fixed.
Right.
$1,000.
Yes.
Okay. Here's the math in public.
Oh my gosh.
Interest rates are now 7.5%. So how much is your monthly payment today, 3 years later?
It's still $1,000. It's a fixed rate mortgage.
It's still, there's people out there go, but Todd, all those people with loans are now paying more money.
No, they're not.
Dude, it's not like I know that some people have never bought a house and they think like, well, my credit card and student loans work that way. So you mean their house payments aren't going up like a ton? Aren't they having to fork over more money every month? No, they got a fixed loan. It's fixed. They don't make it. They're still paying the average mortgage payment in the United States right now for the whole U.S., $1,400. That's the median mortgage payment. Half or less, half or more, the median mortgage payment is $1,400. And
now,
remember that 42% of all homes are what?
They're free and clear. The other thing I want to point out is that there are lots of mortgage payments out there that are $20,000 a month. So when the median is 14, that kind of lets you know that this is pretty affordable.
Okay, here's another quote. Limited inventories, high prices, and labor shortages can be headwinds for some time. And labor shortages are talking about the labor shortages for building new homes.
Right.
Okay, headwinds for some time. But the good news is that single-family permits have held up for the past several months. Affordability is likely to improve as the Fed cuts rates. At that stage, we should see a more stable and healthy housing market. Till then, hang tight. It may be a bumpy ride. Bank of America concluded.
So I agree that it will be a bumpy ride, but maybe I have a different perspective than maybe the Bank of America does, or certainly a perspective that they didn't articulate. So yes, will it be a bumpy ride? Yes, it'll be a bumpy ride because with high interest rates, the seller market is still going to remain locked up pretty tight. So that means inventory will remain tight. With the higher interest rates, it means that new home builders will actually not build as much because it's expensive for them to build. As Todd pointed out, the construction labor market pool is also very tight, so that plays also into the builders not wanting to build as much. So yes, it'll be a bumpy ride, but it'll be a bumpy ride from the perspective that it will simply continue to be difficult to purchase a home because of the availability of homes. There will just not be enough homes available for people to purchase, and certainly not enough homes that people want to purchase.
Okay.
So I think that's what makes it bumpy more than the interest rates. Honestly, the interest rates themselves affect some people, but the lack of inventory affects everyone.
I talked to an agent today who only sells super high-end properties, and I asked him, "Hey, how's your business?" And he goes, "It's great. It's never been better." I go, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Are you finding that the slowdown in sales is affecting you?" He goes, "No." He goes, "Todd, my clients are all paying cash. Every transaction I do is all cash." He goes, "The top of the market, the luxury market is all cash. So nobody cares about what interest rates are going. They're buying these houses cash."
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I've said that before, that the interest rates only impact the people at the bottom, and they simply get shaved off out of the buyer pool, and it diminishes the buyer pool. But in an environment where we don't have any inventory, that's not consequential.
Here's the thing. Imagine that the distance between my fingers are all the potential buyers in a normal market, right? The people who actually buy in a normal market. And we'll take the 40% who are the worst qualified. They have the lowest incomes, the least amount down payment. They're the least qualified to buy. But everyone wants to buy a house, right? Okay. Remember, the number from the chart was that sales are down 40%. So that means only of the normal number of people who would buy, 40% can't buy because there's not enough homes for them to buy. So they're gone anyway. It's like these people who are getting quoted is oh my gosh, I just did the math, and a person with zero down buying a $500,000 house would have a $3,600 a month mortgage payment. Nobody can afford $3,600 a month.
Well, they're paying that in rent.
They're paying that in rent. And yeah, but the whole point is, they're paying that in rent. But the whole point is that that's interesting. We should do a video on that where we talk about how much people pay in rent and people paying high rent amounts, and then, but that's for another video. Okay. But the bottom line is, when this number of sales are down, like if we had a normal market, we had the normal number of houses for like 1.5 million, 2 million that we kind of normally have in the US, then we might be seeing softness because people would start dropping their price to sell because a lot of people are choked off. But those people choked off they're not relevant. And I hate to say this, I've been saying this for a while. Market doesn't need them.
Well, the people are relevant. However, their purchasing power is not needed in the market at the moment.
Right. Okay. Here's the interesting thing. Now, remember, this was a big article. There were actually two articles that were quoted from the same thing. But one of the articles, they actually were talking to a specific person. And this is the quote. Now, this is why you have to be very careful, because we're going to blow this up and we're going to make a bunch of doomers and crash bros super sad and start crying.
So this is a gentleman doing math in public.
Okay, this is what he said that was quoted in the article. Park and his team noted that there are no noticeable signs of excess housing development today like there were back then, and households aren't nearly as burdened by mortgage debt. Then he goes on to say, household mortgage debt represented roughly 65% of U.S. consumers' disposable income in the second quarter, compared to 100% before the GFC. So before the Great Financial Crisis, 100% of all incomes went to service mortgage debt. So all of you out there had only enough money to pay your mortgage and didn't have any money to pay anything else, because it's 100%.
Well, of course, and that's why everybody was extremely thin, because there was no food. Everybody was in the dark because there was no power, and there were no phones, there was no internet, there were no cars, there was nothing, because all we did was pay mortgages, and we really didn't. I don't know how we survived.
Okay, but here's the thing: household mortgage debt. It says they're talking about the second quarter, the second quarter of 2023. Household mortgage debt represented 65% of you. We've got a chart that we're going to show you, which is the actual chart. It's the actual Fed chart. Okay. When you go buy a house, what is usually the highest debt to income ratio you can have? Meaning of your income, what's the most amount of money they will loan you that percentage is a percentage of your monthly income?
So depending on the loan product, it's usually about 36%. There are some products out there that I think are 42.
Okay.
But most of the time it's at 36%.
So even if you bought a house and you bought the biggest house you could possibly buy based on your income, you would have 36% of your income that would go to pay for your mortgage debt, right?
Right.
Then how do we get to 65% knowing that 42% of all people have zero mortgage debt because they own their homes?
Yeah.
And then, so how do we get to 65%? Is it cumulative where you have to add 37 to 28% to get to 65? Like, how does that even make sense?
It doesn't make sense, because we know that a third of people out there are renting. We know 42% own homes free and clear. So that doesn't leave, a whole lot of room for mortgages. And the people who do have mortgages, obviously they're not paying 100% of their income or even 65% of their income to their mortgage, because people couldn't live on that. And it just, they wouldn't be able to get a loan. So it was either a misquote or disingenuous. You take your pick. But either way, it's erroneous.
Okay, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to play a game.
Ooh,
Okay?
I like games.
You can, after I get to talking, you pause the video and put your answer in the comments if you want to play the game. Okay. I want you to guess today what this actual thing that he is saying, household mortgage debt as a percentage of consumer disposable income. Okay. I'm going to say it again. It's household mortgage debt is basically the same thing as mortgage debt service payment is a percentage of disposable personal income.
But I'm going to give you a hint, because Todd's not giving you the hint. This is across the board in the U.S. So you do still have to consider the people. You have to consider the whole U.S. population, and you have to consider the 42% that are free and clear of mortgage. You have to consider the third that are renting and not servicing mortgages either. So this number is not obvious, is what I'm trying to say. But if you've been watching our videos, we've had this chart up before, not that long ago. So you could go at the head of the class and get it right.
Okay. They're claiming 65% of all U.S. consumer disposable income is used to service mortgage debt payments. Okay?
So now the answer.
Okay. Now that you've unpaused your video and you're going to watch the answer here, this is the chart. Mortgage debt service payments as a percentage of disposable personal income. At the peak, before the Great Financial Crisis, a little over 7%. And right now it's 4%. It wasn't 100.
It was never 100.
And it's not 70. And you're going, but Todd, that can't be right. I got a mortgage once and it was a third of my monthly income. You're a single per outlier. And you're probably, that's the highest, because remember, you can't get more than that because the bank won't loan you money. Okay? And what about all the people who have zero? What's a lot of people have zero? And then what about the other people who have those $1,100 a month payments and their family income is, $10,000 a month? Theirs is very low. So this is the problem. People take outliers.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've ever done like debate or argue in front of a court, there's this tactic and technique where what you do is you go find an outlier and then you present it as the whole.
Also known as arguing with your spouse.
But Todd, interest rates have gone up and all those mortgages have adjusted. Everybody has adjustable rate mortgages, and everybody, when they bought that house, it financed it as much as they possibly could to 40% of their income. So now it's 80% of their income, and everybody now, nobody can afford a house. And we see a lot of people come in the comments and they drop these bombs in there that are the advertised rate is 7.8%. Well, most of those people aren't going to qualify for a loan anyway. So just because someone says you could get a 7.8% loan doesn't mean you're going to even to be able to buy a house.
Right.
So you can't take an outlier and then try to put a pin in it and make that and say everybody else is like that, because just like the luxury agent, the people at the high end don't care what interest rates are. They're paying cash. And 42% of the population, and I'm guessing it's a bunch of you that are watching this video, also own your home free and clear, or you have a very small payment compared to your whatever income you're getting. So this 4% number is legit. This is all mortgage debt service payments, the total of everyone in the country, as a percentage of all disposable personal income.
Right. I mean, look, to your point, if you're just picking the outlier, then every 60-year-old man looks like Tom Cruise, right? So, which I know you do, but
kind of. I might be in better, probably not in better shape.
Well, you're not 60. That's what the thing is.
I'm not 60 yet.
There you go. But the point is that you can't using the outliers as the poster child for an entire argument doesn't make sense. Just like when you're having an argument with your partner and you're saying that you always do whatever, it's not always, right? It's kind of the same thing. But we hope this video was interesting to you. If you liked it, please remember to subscribe, hit the notification bell, like the video, share the video, and leave us comments. And if we made you laugh, absolutely like that video and subscribe and hit the notification bell. We'll have more great videos for you. If you have ideas for videos for us, please make sure you drop them in the comments too. And we'll see you on the next video. Bye.
Bye.